Okay, so again, today we're covering the Dynamics 365 security model, how to create your own, and we're going to be covering some of the things that I've learned over the years. One of the things that I mentioned earlier, if you were part of my mailing list, is I have a Security 101 webinar recorded up on YouTube. So if you need some background, go in and take a look at that. That goes into the different components and stuff that we're going to talk about today, just not in detail. And today's more like theory and stuff. There we go. Okay, so this is me. So email, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. I'm going to start putting some just pure videos up on YouTube. So you might want to go and when you're on watching one of my webinars, you might want to go ahead and subscribe to the channel so that anytime that I add something new, it'll automatically email you and let you know about that. So I keep forgetting to mention that to everybody, but there you go. So a little housekeeping. So as always, use the GoToWebinar control panel, and what we're doing there is everybody's muted, of course, so we don't have background noise. If you want to talk, just raise your hand, and I'll try to keep an eye on it. And if you want to talk, just raise your hand, and I'll unmute you. You can ask a question, or just put it in the question box. It'd be great. Okay, that's wrong. So let's get right into it. So the main components of Dynamics 365 security start with business units. Then they have teams, users, and security roles. So these are the three big components that make up, or four big components that make up the security model. Then within security roles, we have privileges and access levels. So this is the kind of the foundation of all Dynamics 365/CRM security. Our access levels are either user, business unit, parent-child business units, or organization. Parent-child business units are the most confusingly named one of all of these, and all this means is it's a peer. So what this means is you can, when you have an access level set to parent-child business unit, that just means that you can see stuff on the same peer level as your business unit is what that means. Very rarely have I actually done that, quite honestly, but it does exist and it's been there forever. So privileges. So we have, 7 privileges? 2, 4, 6, 8 privileges. Create, read, write, update, append, append to, assign, and share. So these are the ones that you set with the little buttons and things like that. What you do, these are for entities, and then we have privileges that are associated with tasks or functionality in the miscellaneous privileges. So record ownership. Records can be owned by the organization, by users, or by teams, the last two being kind of a singular unit within the system. So this is done at the time of creation. It cannot be changed, of course, and as you know, much of the data within Dynamics 365 itself is user or team owned, strictly because of the granularity that they like to have. When you have a record that is owned by the organization, it's either on or off. You can see it or you cannot see it. There's nothing in between, really, in most cases. Users and teams, you have a much more granular access to it, and so you can set it based on business unit or parent-child business units or organization or whatever. That gives you that level. So whenever you're creating new custom entities, you really need to kind of understand that up front, because again, you can't change it once you start. So that's one of the things that you have to watch out for. Sharing is something we've had forever. It actually bypasses the predefined security model. So it's meant to for users to be able to share records with other people that they work with, and it's one of the things that they gave the users the capability of doing. But it also has some really, really bad side effects if you're in a high production environment. When I say high production, I mean like lots of records or lots of chains or things like that. So what happens is there's a thing called the Principal Object Access Table, or POA table as we call it. And every time that you share a record, it creates records inside of that, and that table can grow to ginormous sizes. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So sharing is actually one of the things that I don't like to encourage customers to use, strictly because it can get them in trouble. And the second thing is it's not managed by anyone. It cannot be managed, as a matter of fact. The sharing is available at the record level only. There's no place for the administrator to easily see what has been shared without a lot of work. And I've even seen things that I quite honestly don't even understand when you share stuff and don't share stuff with people. In the case of sharing personal views, I was doing a test about a month ago, and sharing the personal view, when I'm reassigned it to somebody, it actually removed it from me, the administrator's ability to actually even see from a database level. So when I queried the database, it actually wouldn't show it to me, which I found was very odd. We have a new thing starting, I guess, in 2013 called an access team. That's the preferred method. It has it shares just a little bit differently, and there's less impact on the POA table. So we'll talk about that in just a second. So, but sharing still has uses, and I'm not saying don't use it, but just be very, very careful how you use it. What the deal is. So there's a lot of stuff here. Sorry about that, but I couldn't figure out any way to do it. So access teams are something fairly new. And it's a type of team. So we have two types of teams. We have a owner team or ownership team, and then we have an access team. Ownership teams are standard teams that have been CRM for a long time, and they can actually own CRM records. The access teams cannot own a record. What they are used for is strictly to give guidance to the system about how people who are members of the team can access specific records. So you access them by sharing them. So you create a team. It can be automatically populated, by the way, by CRM itself, or you can do it manually. I think most people, when they set this up, actually use the automatic team membership things. A lot of these access teams, if they're system generated, are hidden from team view, so you have to very specifically go look for them, and we'll cover that later on maybe. They can be managed by the system directly, so you don't have to worry about it, or you can do it manually. One of the interesting things that they won't be cached because it doesn't derive privileges or ownership checks. So basically, that means that you don't have to worry about it causing problems with the data being stale or things like that. Okay. Hierarchical security. Give me a show of hands on who has actually used hierarchical security within CRM. Anybody? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, a few people. Not that many. Okay. It's something they added, I think it was in 2015-ish, somewhere in there, I think. And it's the ability to actually define a security model based on either the manager or the position. So a position is literally like a job category, like vice president or CEO or director or manager, things like that. Your manager is actually the manager of you, which is defined on your user record. So it sets up a hierarchy like that. And what this allows you to do is state that the manager can actually see the data of the people that report down to or up to them. And you can actually specify the level of that can happen. So case in point, a sales director would like to see all of the opportunities for all of the sales persons, no matter where they are. Well, the way we do that is we do it with hierarchical security. We set it up to use the manager, and then we've set up all of our employees or the user within the system to have their manager properly. So they report to a sales manager at every office. The sales managers report to the sales director. The sales director can see the things that they own, the things that the sales manager owns, and the things that the salespeople who report to the sales managers own. That's how that works. Position would be very similar, where you would basically, okay, here is a vice president position. I'm going to let them see people that are below them. And again, this works in conjunction with the security roles. So what happens is this is mostly for viewing. The security role still applies to what they can do with it. It's very, very odd, and quite honestly, it takes a little bit of getting used to. We'll talk about testing later, but this is one of the things, if you have to use it, do a lot of research on it. There's a lot of, TechNet has a lot of stuff about how it works, but nothing beats playing with it. I've only done this one time, and it worked just excellent. Did everything we wanted to do without any complicated things at all. The problem was I didn't know it was working, because the guy I was working with went and assigned a security role to the team, to the business unit team, and that was basically overriding all of the security. So it wasn't working like I thought it would, and I wasted 3 or 4 hours trying to figure out why this hierarchical security was broken. Well, it wasn't broken. It was just basically rendered invalid by, I think he gave him system administrator, quite honestly. It was something silly like that. So anyway, all of these things require you to test them out just so you understand how they actually work. So just keep that in mind. You asked, does a hierarchical security bypass B views, business unit views? Not necessarily. It depends. It doesn't negate the security role, but what it does do is it lets you see stuff but not do anything with it. So it's mostly from my experience, and I could be totally wrong, quite honestly. From my experience, it gives you read access to stuff. They can't change things, but they can see them. So that's what I have seen the biggest thing is. So again, this is an addendum to business unit security, okay, with the security roles. So the security roles in the business unit still apply. This just gives them access to the data. So again, I've only done this once, and that's just from that one thing. So. Okay, first rule. I only have one rule, quite honestly, this whole thing. Do not overcomplicate this, okay? This is not rocket surgery, okay? If you cannot explain to somebody what you did, you're doing it wrong, okay? I cannot emphasize this enough, okay? It's just one of those things that this is how it works. Wendell asks, how does this relate to business unit hierarchies? It doesn't, Wendell. It's a totally separate addition to that. So business units and the hierarchies that are there are basically that controls the security for security roles and the data within those. So this is on top of that. So remember, hierarchy security is another thing. So Larry Lentz, who knows everything because he teaches all the time, says direct reports are read write, second level down, read only. Thank you, Larry. I knew it was something silly like that. So what that means is, if I had access to hang on one second. Oh, there it is. Sorry. What that means is, let me go back one slide. Oh, come on. Okay, so what that means is here I am right here. I have Bob and Sally and Jimmy and Jane, and then they each have people down below them, and in some cases down below them. So what that means is I can read and write these people here, my direct reports, but I am read only on their direct reports. Okay, so that makes perfect sense. Thanks, Larry. That's really good help. I don't think I ever saw that anywhere, but that makes perfect sense to me. So yeah, so you can actually read write the people who are in your direct chain, but anybody that is a second level or lower report is read only. Okay, and that's really to keep people from making changes that kind of freak people out. And Robin says Larry does know everything. Of course, Larry knows everything. Everybody knows that. I'm not sure why he even comes to these things, quite honestly. I think he just checks up on me is what I really think he does, which is good. I need checking up on. Okay, let's talk about business unit structure. So this is the first thing you have to do. If you get this wrong, you're totally screwed, okay? Number one, do not, I repeat, do not follow your organization chart. That is not what this is, okay? If you create this like your org chart of your company, you're going to be screwed and you're going to be looking for another job by your choice, not theirs. Okay, they won't figure it out till you after you've left. Okay, that's just how it is. So what I mean by this is, if you have, say, we have a parent organization, and then we have divisions within that, and then we have, say, departments within the divisions. A lot of people will say, okay, well, I'm just going to create one business unit for each of those different things, and then there'll be a hierarchy of requirements or needs within that org chart. That's the wrong thing to do. The reason it's the wrong thing to do is because it will become unmanageable. Because you have to remember that when you create a business unit, what you're actually looking at is individual records that belong to a business unit. So what happens is when you start sharing data across business units, which happens all the time because people in the company work with the same people, right? Same customers, same contacts, etc. So what happens is if you start this structure up, you will end up creating a management nightmare. And most of the time it's just totally unnecessary. To be quite honest, 99% of all of my customers that I've ever worked with of various sizes, nothing ginormous or huge, but say 250 users and less. So I'm kind of in the small market, I guess. Every single one of them had one business unit. All of our access was controlled through security roles. Okay. So, again, it's going to be dependent on how you do things, but just remember that that's really what's for. The way that I have always kind of looked at this is a business unit is going to define something special or unique about the data. So, for instance, if you have a group of customers that can only be worked by this one specific business unit. Government is a really easy one to kind of look at. I've got a specific set of customers that I work with that are high security. Well, in order for me to work with that customer, I have to have a security clearance. Well, that puts me on a very short list of employees. So I could physically create a business unit that only works with that group of customers because of the scenarios that are involved. The other people in my company can work with anybody in the government. But since we deal with possibly sensitive information, or they are worried about us having possibly sensitive information, we have to wall off that data to where we only see the data that is related to us, and the people outside of our little group cannot see it. So that is a good place to put a business unit. Some people put business units in physical locations. That again is fine, but a lot of times it's why are you doing that? Because again, once you start creating a business unit structure, all the other things that we're going to talk about in the next few slides have to be created in there as well. Some of it flows down, some of it does not. So it really kind of depends. So this is the biggest one, and like I said, you get this one wrong, and everything else is going to stack up incorrectly as well. So Barbara has something. Let me understand what she says. We have retail sales and wholesale sales and like to keep them separate and keep the salespeople from seeing each other's opportunities. Is this a place for different business units? It depends, Barbara. So this is an excellent question. So here's the situation. If you have retail customers and you have wholesale customers, is there a possibility ever that people from either department would work with that customer? If the answer is no, then you could put them theoretically in a separate business unit. If the answer is yes, they could end up working with them, then the answer is the separate business unit would cause more problems than it solved. Okay? So again, everything's really specific, to everybody's scenario. There's absolutely no cut and dried rules about any of this stuff. It really kind of just depends on your situation and the testing you do. So realistically, what happens is if we're sharing data amongst employees of your company, and we're interacting at some level, either from just a read-only, like here's my list of accounts that my company works with, this division over here, the retail division works with them in this capacity, but they also have a wholesale operation over here in my company that also deals with some of the same people, and then that gets kind of confusing. So I would actually, most of that stuff I would handle with actually teams or security, basic security roles. Okay. Record ownership. So as we talked about earlier, records are either organization owned or user team owned. And for most of the things we're going to be working with, this is predetermined by Microsoft based on their experiences and how they created the system. And again, once it's created, it can't be changed. So for instance, accounts and contacts are two most favorite and used entities. If I have a group of people working with an account, say contact is simplest, let's say mortgage, you're in a mortgage business. You got 5 people that are going to work with that person to get that mortgage completed. It's probably more efficient for a team to own that mortgage than for a user to own the mortgage and share it out. When a record is owned by the team, the members of the team see the record just as it belongs to them because it does belong to them. Okay, it just happens the team is the true owner. A friend of mine, Scott Sewell, was working for a customer down in Florida, and it was really cool. What they did is all records were owned by teams, all of them, no exceptions. they actually had a job that ran every night they used Scribe, and it would do a query of CRM to look for any records that had been created that day that were owned by users. And then if they found any, they would flip them over to the most appropriate team so that they had basically no problems with that. And the reason that we do this is basically to prevent churn of records. So what happens is when you own a record and you leave or you change jobs or whatever it might be, we have to do something with those records. We have to reassign them. If you have been in your job a long time, you may own thousands of records or hundreds of thousands of records, or whatever it might be. So that creates a bit of problem because you're going to impact the system when those records have to be assigned. It may work, it may not work. It could cause all kinds of fancy problems. It depends on how much data it is. Having them owned by the team is actually much better for the system and actually for the users than the individual owners. It's very clean. There are not many POA table records that we talked about. And we don't have to worry about the ownership of records because the team owns them. So, for instance, if we have the Dallas sales team, well, the Dallas sales team may have 10 people a day. It may have 100 people tomorrow. We don't know. We don't have to worry about it. The Dallas team owns all the records in Dallas. The San Antonio team owns the San Antonio records. Real simple. So this is a really easy way to prevent a lot of strange problems related to sharing of records and other things where an individual doesn't need to actually own a record and a team is much more efficient at everything. Okay, doesn't apply to all things, but it does for a lot. So John has one. Will an account assigned to a team cascade that default team ownership down to new child records, accounts, contacts, even being owned by teams? Oh, John, that is a great question. I don't know the answer to that. So what he's talking about, if you create a child record of an account owned by a team, who is the new owner of that new account? Larry, do you know what that answer is? Larry, I'm going to mute you, Larry. Hang on. Where are you? Okay, Larry, you're unmuted. Do you know that answer?
Yeah, I just typed something for you.
Oh, you did? Oh, there it is. Yeah, the default owner is the creator. So yeah, so basically the user that creates the record owns it. So you'll have to have something behind the scenes or manually just reassign it after it's created. Debbie says, so when an account or contact is created by a user, you would need to adjust all of the records to team ownership. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. So when you create it, it's going to be owned by you. So either you can have a plugin behind the scenes that does it. You could do it with a workflow, or you could do it just manually so that it just gets changed automatically. And there's 2 or 3 different ways to do that. Probably depends on your volume. Light volume, I would just use a workflow. That's the easiest way to do it. Okay, thanks, Larry. Thanks, John. Debbie. Then he goes, but the owner would not have the contact info on the user's Outlook. Okay, so what you're saying there, if they're owned by the team, no, if they're owned by the team, they should get the access to the records owned by the team as long as they're a member of that team. If it doesn't work like that, then somebody tell me. That's my understanding of how it worked. Yeah, Robert says agreed. Okay, so the next thing you have to watch out for, Hugh says individual Outlook contacts. Once you get those, Hugh, once you get them inside of CRM, then you're going to have to change the ownership at that point. But yeah, they're not going to be assigned to a team from Outlook. That's a 2-step process, absolutely. I'm talking about creating a new record from inside of CRM. Okay, access levels. So this is where you'll spend a lot of your time. Who has access to what? Okay, so what do we have access to as far as records, accounts, contacts? Do we prevent people from deleting things? Normal people. Do we let management delete things? Do we turn off sharing for a specific type of record? Things like that. These things have to be made in kind of a it would really help to do them up front. It doesn't hurt anything to do it later, but it could cause problems. Do you have any special groups that need to exist with the I should say special access. Sorry, I forgot the word access. But anyway, so anything that's odd, I'm going to say odd because it's not normal, so abnormal. So if a group, say accounting, maybe accounting has special privileges to account to modify specific types of data that other people don't have access to. That would be a special group in my thing. Any other weird accommodations that must be made. So this is more of a documentation process than anything. So, what has to happen to these things to make them fit within our model? A lot of times the defaults work just fine. Larry says you could use mapping to change ownership when a record is created from within parent. That's possible, yeah. Okay, security roles. This is the biggest thing people kind of get crazy about. Point one, the fewer number of security roles that you can get away with is better for everybody. Don't go crazy with stuff. I've mentioned on other, I don't know if I did on the other webinar, but make your security roles unique. So it drives me crazy to walk into an organization and I find security roles applied to a user that's the salesperson, sales managers. Okay, now what? Okay, and so then you're like literally go compare dots to figure out what the heck is the difference between these two and why do they have both of them? Because if I took out one, it's going to stop something from working, and I don't know what that thing is. So that's the thing. So what security roles are needed? What I generally do, salesperson is, in my opinion, the generic CRM user's level of security. That's what I start with for just about everybody. And then kind of work up from there and make modifications. So I copy the role and then leave the salesperson as it is, and then just copy it and rename it whatever I want. If you have multiple business units, security roles can be inherited from the parent, which you cannot change inside of the child business unit. So the changes must be made at the very top, and they will flow downwards. And then the thing is there anything specific to that business unit? So again, is there something that this business unit does that is slightly different than everyone else? Do the people within the business unit need special access? That's where you create these. So what you would do within the business unit itself, you can copy the new salesperson role to create a secondary salesperson role, for instance, that is specific to that business unit. So it's a copy and it exists only in the business unit, so it doesn't interfere with the other higher level salesperson that you created. Does that make sense? Okay. Minier has a thing. When I am asked to create a specific permission on one specific field or entity action, I now create a security role for just that permission, give the green dot, nothing else. It's easy to read and review given the managed roles view. Yeah, I do the same. So what he's talking about is if you have a very specific special scenario, what I do is I actually create a security role for that. So what I'll do is I'll copy the salesperson role, then I will remove all security. Now it's a pain in the butt, takes a bit of time, but what you end up with is a security role without any privileges in it. And then I go and add exactly the privileges that I need for that one thing, and then give that role to the person in addition to their normal role, and that will give them access to that entity specifically. Like I said, it's a kind of pain to set up initially, but once you do that, it's pretty cool. Okay, a tool has one. Let me read this. It's kind of long. I'll answer first. Nigel, once you create a new security role, I don't like to create new security roles from scratch because there are hidden privileges inside of every security role. And if you create one from scratch, those privileges traditionally have not been there. And it ends up with very odd problems way down the line. So just always copy a security role. That's my number one thing that I do with security roles. Okay, a tool from a new entity X creation. I set the ownership to user team from a security role. for that entity I have set to create for the organization level. Now, if I create record X, will it be limited to my team? No, it will not be limited to your team. Will it be accessible for the organization? Yes, because you set it to organization. And what's the significance of ownership here? When you create an entity type with ownership to organization, it is generally on or off. Everyone can see it or no one can see it. That's the difference. When you do it user team, you have the ability to do user, business unit, parent-child business unit, or organization. So you have a much more granular thing. Nigel, if the user already has that role, it's moot. Yes, it doesn't matter. But what we're talking about now is creating a role that only has one set of privileges in it for a very specific entity. That's what we're talking about. Debbie asked if there's a matrix or chart to explain what the security role features mean. No, there's not. I need to add that to my security book, but it's a lot to update, so I haven't had time. John says, if you share a parent record with a team and the child records inherit those permissions, that depends on your cascading for the relationship that you've set up. I don't know what the default is for the entity, but it might. It really depends on the cascading thing. Okay. The next one is field level security. So you do get to a point at some time where you have fields that are specific to certain people, when they're actually very small group of people usually. So anything that is not seen by the general populace of your user base, you can secure with field level security. And again, field level security is different from every other part of security within CRM because it's not done by role, it's actually done by person. So you create a field level security profile, assign that to a user or team, and then that's how you assign record level security for that specific field. So if they're not part of the field or part of the profile, they don't get to see the field. So over the years, I've probably done this 2 or 3 times. It really depends on the level of data that we're storing and how confidential it is. That's pretty much it. So not a huge thing on that, but again, it really depends on your installation. Most of the time what we do is we secure things at the entity level, not at the field level. But again, it really kind of depends on situation here. Number 6 is features. What features do you allow your users to do? So features are what's listed in the miscellaneous privileges of all the different tabs that we have. So these are generally by organization. In 99% of all cases, they're either on or off, as you can see. So green dot or red dot, okay? And if we don't have the green dot, it won't show up. So do we let people bulk delete things? Yes or no? Hopefully not. That kind of causes problems. This came out of whatever this came out of. This was customizations, business management, something like that. Anyway, so are there specific features that we don't want the users to get to? So that's another thing we need to be concerned about because, I can't tell you how many times we've let people do stuff that they didn't really understand what they were doing, and it causes massive problems. Implementation. The only way you're going to figure this stuff out is to actually do it. And I wish there was a better way to do it, but all the paperwork in the world won't solve you from testing. Okay, so here's my 3 phases of implementation. Any questions? Nope. So what I would recommend is if you're on premises, have a development box that you can test these things out on that has the same users and hopefully some of the same, if not exactly the same data. If you're online, hopefully you have a sandbox in your organization. You can do the same thing within the sandbox. It still has the same users. You can promote backwards or the production data, and you can do the testing there. Again, nothing is going to really let you see how things work because there are so many interconnected pieces to this that sometimes it's really hard to figure out what is actually occurring. Like I said, the time I worked with the Hierarchical Security, literally 4 hours. And I was like, I am either the stupidest person who's ever touched CRM or I don't understand how this thing works. And finally what happened was I called my friend Scott Sewell and I was like, dude, I don't get this. I was like, this doesn't appear to be working at all. He goes, "Are you sure there's not a security role assigned?" Of course, there's not a security role assigned to the team, except there was. Okay, and but it's one of those things. I knew it wasn't possible, which is what happened. Anytime there's more cooks in the kitchen than you got to watch these things. And like I said, why the guy did that, I have no clue whatsoever. But he literally assigned a role to the business unit team, and I had no idea, and that literally wasted 4 hours of time. Okay, caveats here. One of the biggest problem with working in the kind of the steps I just said, like the doing it in development, verifying it, is you can't move that stuff to the production environment. So anything you do in development is going to have to be recreated manually in production. Security roles move just fine, but for most part anyway. But things like access teams, hierarchical security, those are settings that are dependent on the environment. So you're going to have to actually reproduce them and recreate them. The XRM Toolbox has an access team integration tool that helps you move access teams from one environment to the other by exporting out to a CSV file and re-importing. So that's a cool thing there. So it saves us a bit of time. A tool says, back to this field level security, is there any way we can apply field level security to all fields on a section or tab? No, that's a manual process. It's done at the field level, not the form level. So you have to change that on every form, every field. Lance says, I've tried a few times to implement group teams-based security in CRM, have not been successful, meaning that I have created teams, assigned those users to teams, and when assign security roles to the teams rather than the user, only gets the salesperson role, since most of the advanced privileges do not filter down to the user team. Lance, you may have something else going on there. If you assign let me go back here. I think I didn't cover that. The last bullet there. You can assign security roles at the user or team level. And Lance, it depends on your version of CRM, 100%. So what Lance is talking about, he assigned roles to the user via the team, and they didn't look like they trickled down. They do trickle down. Okay. The problem is every user has to have at least one security role, so that you cannot get away from that. So they have to have something assigned, and then what happens is CRM will take all the security roles assigned to them and to the team level, and they should package them together and end up with a final result of privileges and access levels. That's what should happen. If you're not seeing that, I would open a case. There could be something wrong, quite honestly. But that's a good thing there. Okay. When all else fails, write a plugin. I know that sounds kind of odd, and that's kind of the absolute worst case scenario in my professional opinion. But sometimes you do have unique stuff to where you just need it done programmatically, and there's no way around it. This Dynamics 365 workflow tools, which are currently on Coplex, and I hope he moves them over to GitHub before Coplex dies. That has some custom workflow activities in it that will help you assign roles to users and teams, to share with users and teams, and then do things like that. So you can actually automate some of these things with just pure workflows if you want. And the last thing there is don't be afraid to examine the new technologies. Like Access Teams came out in 2013, so that's a new thing. So if you start over with 4.0 or 3.0 or 2011 and you get to 2013 and above, and you're still using sharing to do all your work with, maybe you need to look at Access Teams, or maybe you need to change the way that you're doing things. So don't be afraid to test some of these things out, because there are always better ways to do things as they advance the technology. So some of the things we did 5 years ago, we don't need to do anymore, strictly because we were limited in the technology at the time. Now we're not. Like the hierarchical security, I think I've done that a couple times programmatically over the years. I'm not positive, but that sounds familiar. The sharing stuff I know I have done. I've actually written plugins to actually auto-share stuff because of the way that the customer had their inside versus outside sales rep set up. Okay. If you're on premises, one thing to note is depending on where you started out with CRM, say if you started off with CRM 4 2011, There were bugs that could introduce orphan records into your POA table to the tune of, it could be a large quantity of them. If you've been around a long time and have a lot, you could actually end up with millions of records in the POA table accidentally. This article here will actually allow you to run a SQL script to clean up the POA table. That happened to one of my customers a few years ago. We were doing a email cleanup, process cleanup is what it was, and their POA table had, oh Jesus, it was 26 million rows or something like that, and they only had like 6 million rows of data overall. So it was like something was really screwed up. And what had happened was there was a bug in 4.0 that would leave things in the POA table accidentally, and it had been there for years, and they didn't know it because no one had ever looked. And so basically, we ran this article has a script in a SQL script, and it went and actually cleaned out all the ones that don't report to anything. So it's just one of the things that you can kind of watch out for. Okay, so what do you guys think? What do you want to talk about? Oh Jesus, Manera, write me a book. Let's see here. Oh yeah, he brings up some good. Munir says, um, if a user doesn't have access to a secured field that does not have update rights, and they perform an action that triggers a workflow that needs to update that, then it will break the workflow and bring up a user access rights message. That is 100% correct. So a lot of the times, you again, all of these things that you're doing are all interrelated. So you have to be very careful how you do stuff. So like the instance here, we're talking about working with a field level security. So what happens is you've secured the field from being able to update, but you have a workflow going on behind the scenes that will actually run it, update something behind the scenes. Depending on how the workflow is run and who owns the workflow, it could fail. So Munir, I think the way you can get around that is making sure that you run it as somebody else with a higher level of security. That may fix that. He says, is there a way to only allow delete capability for record status such as activity is open or scheduled? No, there's not. You're talking about if only delete if it's open or scheduled? No. If you're trying, that won't work. You have to do a plugin for that. Is there a way to change roles for users in bulk? Yeah, you just select them, and I think you can do that, can't you? Let's see. Come on, you can do it. Manage roles. So basically, you select them and just select manage roles and just pick the one you want, like server schedule manager, and do that. You can only add it in bulk. Yeah, that's probably true, Robin. Let's see. Wendell had one. Two separate groups, east and west, use two BUs or two sister position hierarchies, east and west. Wendell, I don't know enough about what you want to do with that. So it depends what's. It really doesn't matter where the people are or how many businesses you have. It's what are you doing with the data is the deal. Yeah. Okay. John says, can any of the 15 out of the box roles be tweaked or modified? Absolutely. Everything but system administrator you can modify. So I just don't do that because I like to have a copy in case I screw it up, which does happen. Okay. So having a reference copy to go back to is really, really good. So that's why I always copy, just do a, when you have a security role open, or how to do it here, I can't remember. Yeah. Copy role, give it a new name, whatever, and then I work on that one. That way the original stays where it is. He was, Hugh, you cannot remove bulk. You have to, not, there may be one of the tools in the XRM toolbox, I think, will do that, but not the native interface. Siva wants to know how to export all the data with activities from Dynamics 365. Daniel Kai has Kingsway Soft. They have an SSIS connector. That's what I would use. Okay, now it brings up good. What approach would you take where you have a requirement to prevent a user from accessing one particular record in an entity where they normally have access to it? Uh, Basically, we don't have record level security, Nigel. That's the problem. So to create record level security, you have to do something special. So most of the time, what you do is you create a secondary entity that has only that stuff in it, and then secure that at the user level, and then only grant the people who own it control of it. Okay. Let's save it one more time. Kingswaysoft.com. They have an SSIS connector, and you can connect that and download the CRM data to a local data store, or you can actually use the export service that comes with CRM to do it probably as well. Rajesh asks, what are the main use of access teams? It's basically it's a way to automatically share stuff. So what you do is I think the most frequent that I've seen is you create you create an access team template for like in the account. This is you can look up how you do it. This is a really weird way of working, but this is what it is. You create an access team for a specific entity and then said, this is what I would like people on this team to be able to do. Okay, so these things here. So append, append to, read, and write. No share, no assign, no delete. Then what happens is when I apply that, now the first thing I had to do, by the way, is I had to go to the entity itself and I had to turn on access teams. So there's a checkbox kind of about halfway down the properties says access teams. You have to check that and save it. Once you save it, it'll show up on the list. And then what happens is once I go to say open up an account, like I said, this is documented on YouTube, not YouTube, well probably YouTube, but everywhere else, TechNet and things like that. You go and add a record here. Sorry. A subgrid that points to the user entity, and then the view you're looking for is associated team members. Okay, very unintuitive. Then you go and you pick the member, and then what will happen, Krista now has read, write, append, and append to level access to this record for Abbott Laboratories just by me doing this. So what this has done, there is actually a hidden team that was created behind the scenes that will tie this CM record, which is an account, to this group of people. Okay, again, very, very, very hard to kind of visualize, quite honestly. Like I said, just documented the partners, and Microsoft has actually documented it. But the main thing here is you put this subgrid on the record, and then you populate that, and then from that point forward, it will take care of all the record access. So just by doing this, even though Krista may be in a different place, different business unit or whatever, you can give her access to this record. Does that make sense? Let's see. John has another one. If a meeting was assigned to a team of 10 users and I reported on the quantity of meetings for these users over a given time, would these team meetings be reflected on the totals for each user? The answer should be yes. Most of the views that we have, let's see. that. I think it's going to make a liar out of me. Hang on 1 second. Let me go find it. So basically, this is a list of all the team members' activities. So since you are part of the team, or the members are part of the team, and if the record's owned by the team, it should show up on each of their individually, I think. Okay, a tool has another one. Can I apply a field level security to a field which has an HTML resource with it? That those two are totally mutually exclusive. Fields and HTML resources are totally different. So fields are fields. So you cannot secure HTML web resources at all. Jafar John says when there are multiple security features are assigned to a user for the same record, which of these features take precedence? The way that CRM security works is the most permissive feature wins. So if you have two security rules applied, one gives you organizational access, one gives you no access. Organizational is higher than no, therefore you will have organizational. So it's always most permissive. Okay. What else you got? That's good questions. Make sure I got others. Is that it? Okay. Well, I think that's it for today. So